Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming listeners to part 2 of our amazing interview with David Parker. If you haven't heard part 1 as yet, I would encourage you to listen to that show dated July 8th, 2024, which can be found at NDE Radio at TalkZone or in our YouTube library at NDE Radio with Lee Witting. That show highlights David's NDE at age 5 and some of his many other encounters with the other side, including the tragic loss of his wife and children, and how the mature spirits of those children scolded him into his recovery. In this show, part 2, you will hear David's move into hospice nursing, his witness to the connection of dying patients with the other side even before they go, an event where a powerful spirit willed him to stop the murder of many AIDS patients, and how spirits came to help entertain dying children. Finally, David describes how he negotiated with his own blood clots to recover from the symptoms of a devastating stroke. David, sadly, while you weren't able to comfort your own children when they died, in your new role as a pediatric hospice nurse, you did comfort many dying children.
Right. Yeah. I couldn't comfort my children. I couldn't alleviate the fear if they saw the car coming or hitting them or being crushed underneath the tires. I couldn't do any of that for them, but I could for somebody else. Yeah. And when the pediatric inpatient unit opened, I said, yes, put me there. I will definitely be there. And we had somebody donate a building to us. They did a fundraiser and bought it. And I said, I'll be the first one. I'll go. And we were open for 5 years, and finally it closed due to the cost. But we had 10 beds, and it was newborns up to 17-year-olds. And, we would have 13, 14-year-old mothers with their very firstborn with a birth defect that were coming in. And it was a very emotional place, because you never know. Sometimes you go up and help people. Sometimes you just need to leave them alone. And that would be like my prayer on the way into work every single day. All of my thoughts, words, and actions are done in the name of Spirit. I would say, show me what to do. You know more than I. Should I go in and say hello? Should I take over? Should I ask permission? Should I leave you alone? Should I give the parents some, time, whatever? And I would go with that feeling. This is what I need to do. It was a horrible place because of so many nasty, horrible things happening to such cute little wonderful children. But how marvelous to have that facility. And we had some darn good nurses. Yeah. And not only we moved the kids in, we moved the parents in too. And we didn't have a whole lot of room with 10 patients, 10 children. But we would throw blankets on the floor, and mom and dad could sleep there. Put beds on the sofa. We just moved them in, and we had a kitchen. And when we cooked for them, or we had the parents cook for everybody. It was absolutely marvelous. What a wonderful, magical place it was.
You talk about 3 little kids watching little people from the spirit world. Tell us that story.
And this was at the pediatric 10-bed inpatient unit, and we had one room. And it was a huge room, and there was 2 dividers in it, and the dividers were walls, floor-to-ceiling walls, and that divided the room into 3 little cubicles, and we could put a bed in each one. And though the children or whoever's in that room couldn't hear or couldn't see what was going on in the bed next to them, I could be at the other end of the room, and I could see all three of them at the same time. And it was so nice because we'd put some of our sickest kids there that needed a lot of intervention. And I wouldn't have to run up and down the hall looking in each room. I could just kind of watch these kids. And some would be on ventilators and drips and tubes and drains, and we'd need to suction. We'd need to do a lot of things. The other 7 beds were in private rooms down the hall. And the same thing happened in these rooms too. But it was interesting. Children's near-death visions are different than what the adult hospice near-death visions were. Children weren't reporting, at least, seeing long-lost family members or long-dead family members visiting them. And, the adults would. The adults would carry on conversations with people and recognize old families. And the children didn't. And maybe it's because they were too young, to know of family members that were passed on. But so frequently, our children that did speak, and we had many that were non-responsive. Some were medicated, but not all of our kids were medicated. Not all of our kids required narcotics, depending on their diagnosis. So this wasn't drug-induced. But almost universally, when they would say what they were seeing, it was exactly the same thing. Even in this one room where there would be 3 children, or even in the private rooms when we had children that could speak, they saw, and they drew pictures of it too. They looked like they were about 4 feet tall, very skinny. They had long arms, long hands, just a couple fingers, and their heads were very, very thin, had big eyes. And this was back in the 90s when we had this inpatient unit. And I knew nothing about UFOs or anything like that. But what the kids were describing would be like an alien gray, except alien grays, I guess, have big heads. And these kids saw the exact same thing, except they were very skinny, long heads on them, but the big eyes and the fingers and their whole body is very, very thin. And most of the kids enjoyed looking at them. Most of them were having a good time or just fascinated by what they were doing. Other children would hide. Other children were absolutely terrified of them. But the ones that really enjoyed them sometimes would just laugh. I just thought it was very funny. Look what they're doing. Ha, 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 ha. Oh, look what he's doing to you. He'd be pointing to me like these things are around me. And I'm looking, I don't see anything. And I see stuff. I never once saw one of these things. And so many times I would say, please let me see you. I want to see what the kids are seeing. You sound like a blast. And sometimes the beings, whatever they were talking to the children, and these kids in the same room at the same time, the ones that we had that were responsive, would repeat back to the beings the exact same words. And with the partitions, the kids couldn't see each other. And these are not playful kids up and jumping around. I don't think any of our kids were able to get out of bed. I mean, our kids, we got them towards the end of the life. Generally, medicine tries to treat children right up to the very end. So I don't think any of our children lived more than 2 weeks. A lot of them, not even near that. So these were advanced in their disease process. But they would say at the same time, with partitions between them, it would sound like to, ba, mi, ra, da, se, ma, ka, ti, like that. And that's not a quote, but that's what it would sound like. And sometimes at unison, they'd be looking at the same spot in the room, which I couldn't see anything there, but they could see them, and they would laugh at the same time. So they were obviously seeing something similar. And in the children that were conscious and were, talking in the private rooms, were also seeing these same things, these skinny, whatever they were. And I just assumed they were just skinny spirits for children, to come help them cross over. I had no idea what they were. I would try to ask questions at time, trying to get some information. But if the parents are there, the parents are already stressed within an inch of their lives. And I didn't want to freak them out to think, oh, there's something now worse going on with their child. So I had to be very diligent, how I approached them if the parents were there. But if the parents were out or, getting something to eat, especially if the nurse is in the room, the parents will take a break and stretch their legs, and we can talk to them. And they would actually draw pictures somewhere. I hope I still have some of the pictures, but it was just this skinny thing. I have no idea what it was, but it was weird. And this is over 5 years, and our kids aren't interacting with each other. So it's obviously something that was appearing to terminally ill children, at least in that location. And I've talked to people, the other pediatric nurses, and some would say, the kids saw something, but they didn't pay any attention to ask them what it was. So I don't know. I don't know if it's a universal thing just for children. I did pediatric burn also for 5 years, and but those kids they were constantly on narcotics, and I don't remember them saying anything. But we pretty much had them out where we were replacing skin, doing skin grafts.
Figures that you did see at this time, you described them as refrigerator people.
That was weird.
Was that over adults rather than children?
That was adults. And I worked in we had a 35-bed AIDS inpatient unit, and it was open for 3 years. At the time when AIDS, it was such a crisis, and hospitals didn't want to take them, and nurses were allowed to refuse care for AIDS patients at the time. This is like 35 years ago. So they opened up an AIDS unit, and I thought, yeah, heck yes, I'm going to go. And so I went over, and we opened up an old nursing home, and we just opened the doors and, come in, we'll take care of you. Until we ran out of money, like 3 years later. But very often, the AIDS patients and then some of the adult hospice patients, I would see these beings, and it looked like light was coming down, out of the ceiling or something on top of them. And I could see their heads and their shoulders, and they were big. Their shoulders were about 6 feet tall, at the size of a refrigerator. They're big, like a refrigerator. And that's why I called them refrigerator people. I don't know what they were. They had big, strong, square shoulders, no neck, like a slightly oval head, just kind of propped up. And I could see a little bit of an arm, but I couldn't see the rest of the body. It was just like this glow coming down on them. And as people were approaching death, I would see them in the room against a wall. The wall in the room. First, it'd be like 1 or 2 or 3. And then, maybe by the end of the shift, there's, two or three more appear. And as the patients get closer and closer to death, more and more and more would appear around the room. And as they were getting sicker and sicker, they would start moving forward. And I never saw them move. Like when I would go in the room, they had evidently moved about, 2 or 3 feet closer to the bed. And there would be so many in a room at times, I would have to walk through some of them. And I felt very uncomfortable, like I'm interfering. And I would, when I walked through them, I'd say, excuse me, pardon me, I got to get through. I got to, do what I got to do. I got to change the patient, give them medicine, do whatever. They never once responded to me. It was like none of them even looked at me or knew I was there, but I could see them clearly. There was a glow over all of them just coming down. They looked almost like, like a 1940s robot in a sci-fi movie or something like that. Big shoulders, just like a bunch of refrigerators with heads on it. And they would get closer and closer and closer. And finally, they would be completely surrounding the bed. Sometimes maybe 30, 40 of them in a room. At times, there'd be that many. And I just knew this is it. They're ready to go. And then when we go into the room again, they'd all be gone and the patient's dead. And when they were in the room, it was like there was a glow in the room. It was like this, I couldn't see a light shining, but it was like a light source, but it looked like a light shining down on them. And it kind of like illuminated the room. And when the patient died and these things were gone, it was just like a dark, still, empty room. You could just feel there was nothing there. And I saw this a couple hundred times, and not on everybody, just every now and then, certain people. And maybe they appear to everybody, but I only saw it on a couple people, or maybe they were just there for certain people. And why I saw them, I don't know. A lot of the AIDS patients, and then a lot of the adult patients, when I worked in a 10-bed adult inpatient unit, and that was 12 years of doing that. I saw them again and again and again, and I was just used to them. And sometimes I would reach out to them in my mind, who are you? What are you doing? Am I in the way? What would you like me to do? I got nothing back from them ever. I got no feeling of good or bad. It was just neutral, but it was so obvious. And sometimes I worked day shift and sometimes I worked night shift. Over the years, mostly I did night shift. It was day and night. They were there, and I don't know how they moved. The movement was, whenever I wasn't there, they moved, and they would just be all around the place. I don't know. Someone said that they saw some cave drawing or something that sounded like that. I don't know. I have no idea what that was. Hundreds of times I saw that.
I have to ask you too about the woman that tried to murder the AIDS patients.
Oh my gosh!
Spirit helped you to stop her.
That was amazing. That's at the AIDS facility. We had we started out with one patient till we kind of figured out what we were doing. Finally, we got up to like 35 patients. And then towards the end, we got up to 55 patients. When we had about, I don't know, at the time, maybe about 20, 25 patients there. And people would come and go. The front door was open and it was right by the nurse's station. And I worked night shift then at the time. And, a lot of our patients had visitors at night because they worked all day. So we just, if they wanted to come in the middle of the night, come in. Our patients are dying. If they have a visitor, how wonderful. It was about the beginning of my night shift. I think I probably started at 7 or 7:30, something like that. I'm doing some paperwork in the nurse's station. I was about to head down the hall and check on my patients. And I heard the door open and this woman walks by, had this huge tray of cookies, homemade cookies. And you could just smell them. My God, they smelled wonderful. And she had dozens and dozens and dozens. It was just piled up. It smelled so good. And, she kind of looked at me and walked on by. And I just figured it was another visitor. Inside my head, I heard shouting. And it was, stop her, 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 stop her. It was like, what? What? What are you talking about? I didn't know what that was. And then I was sitting doing some paperwork. It wasn't me. It was something else. It was like I got picked up out of that chair and I was on my feet. I did not purposely stand. I did not use leg muscles to stand up. I was picked up and put on my feet. And it was like my feet had a mind of their own and was walking around the desk and walking through my office and going into the hallway towards this woman with the cookies. And I kept hearing, stop her, stop her, stop her, stop her, stop her. And it's like, what the heck is going on? And I had no control over my body. And she's about to approach the first room. We had a patient and his wife was visiting that night right then. And I just like zoomed around her and I stood in the doorway, blocking her. She was still in the hallway. My back is in the patient's room. And I'm right in the door frame. And she is bound and determined to get into that room and give this guy some cookies. And I was real skinny at the time. She was this big, hefty woman. And she is pushing me and mad and staring at me. And I'm still hearing, stop her, stop her, stop her. I'm thinking, what the heck is going on? And she had some force behind her. She could have easily knocked me away. And I felt behind me like this solid wall just appeared. It was warm. And it was like I backed up against a wall. And she's pushing me, and she's pushing me so much. Her face is literally touching my face. We're like eyeball to eyeball. I could smell her makeup. She was pushing me, and that I was being squished between her and this warm wall behind me. I couldn't move. She couldn't budge me and kept pushing. And by then, there was like 4 or 5 patients, family members, and some staff in the hallway watching this. I'm sure they're looking at this big platter of cookies and this woman trying to knock me down. I'm probably wondering what's going on. And I just stood there and said, no, you're not. No, you're not. No, you're not. I'm hearing, stop me, stop me, stop her, stop her, stop her. Well, finally she gives up and she gives me the tray of cookies. She goes, well, you give them out then, and pushes me and then turns around and stomps out of the building. And everybody's looking at me like, David, what's wrong with you? Why would you deny us cookies? And I was like, yeah, no, I don't know. And she's gone. People are wanting to grab some cookies, and they smell wonderful. Well, our AIDS patients all had GI problems. We all had them in adult diapers, and we had to change them frequently. And so we would tie them up in little trash bags, and then throw the trash bags into a big trash container we had in the hallway on wheels, and we'd carry it around and take that out to the dumpster. And that was right next to me. And I walked over to it, put the lid off, and I slid the tray and all the cookies on top of the bags of dirty diapers. And people are, David, what are you doing? You're nuts. Damn you. They were cussing me out because everybody wanted some. I didn't have control. It was like something else took over my body, and I couldn't explain it. Everybody was mad at me. And, we just went about our shift. Well, one of my coworkers took that dumpster with the dirty diapers in it and all the cookies and hid it in our director's office, because the next day when he came in, he wanted to report me and get me fired for, destroying out dozens and dozens of great big chocolate chip cookies. And the next night when I came on, I got called into the director's office. And I almost did get fired. What a horrible thing. These people have such a miserable life. And somebody took the time to bake all these cookies, and you wouldn't let anybody have it. How can you explain this? And I couldn't explain it. It was something else took over my body. We had it was a police officer, a sheriff, or somebody. His son had died of AIDS, and he would come in and volunteer in memory of his son and help take care of our AIDS patients. And we had talked quite a few times, and he knew I was a good person, and there's no way I would do anything bad or something to harm the patients. So he knew something was going on. And I didn't know this at the time, but he went into the director's office and retrieved the cookies out of the diaper trash bag and had them analyzed. And about a week or two later, I'm still working, but people are still mad at me. They get the results back, and all the cookies were filled with ground light bulbs. And it's something you wouldn't taste, but what it would do was just lacerate their throat, their esophagus, their stomach, their intestines. And I was later told by our medical director that those little shards of glass, there's no way that you could remove those, and everybody would have just bled to death.
Wow. So
I saved everybody's life. My director never apologized to me.
Really?
Did apologize. That would have made the news. And the police came through and they interviewed everybody but me about this woman trying to find out who she was. No one knew who she was. I don't know, because of the volunteer, maybe because he and I had talked, maybe they counted that as a police investigation. I never heard whatever happened about that. I was on the unit, I was a hero finally. I was cleared by what went on. And I would tell people, every day I open myself up to the universe. Use me as you see fit. You know better than I do. And so I surrender myself. And I don't know, but I suspect the universe took me up on that offer and took over my body and saved those people's lives. And I thought about that every now and then. And about 20 years later, I was in my living room. It was daylight, just a normal day. I think I just finished meditating. And I saw the outline of all these heads. It was like people in my living room. It's like right to the right of where I am right now. Just loads of heads. Like there was a light in the background. And I got this. The message that came through, to try to put it into words, is we were there to die, not be murdered. Thank you.
So
we were there to die, not be murdered. Thank you. Oh my God.
what a blessing. What a blessing that whatever force it was that took over your body used you to do that.
Yeah. And I got my answer, 20 years later, but maybe it was a second to them that I did the right thing. Certainly did do the right thing. What an amazing gift that was. And it used me. That's fine. I'm more than willing to be a vessel for whatever. But I had no idea at the time. I didn't realize what was going on. And I think that's the way spirit kind of works sometimes. I think it's got a kitschy little sense of humor, kind of like, pushes you to the edge and says, gotcha,
Well, one little event that you noticed, you figured out right away, and that was the woman sitting on the side of her bed.
Oh my God, that's my favorite. Let me tell you that one. I have told this to so many people in all my years of nursing, and I've always been open about this stuff. People keep saying, you keep saying you're seeing this stuff, you're going to get fired. Well, I never did. I think when you're forward, I felt so comfortable with being in contact with spirit, or spirit being in contact with me and me being aware of it, that I love to be a voice about it, because the more you talk about it, the more it might open up somebody else to maybe share their story. And when you start sharing your story with spirit, spirit gives you more. The more you open the door to spirit, the more that comes through. So I've always been very, very vocal about this. And sometimes people just shake their heads and walk away. Well, that's fine. And sometimes people just give me stares. That's okay. But other people say, yeah, I know what you're talking about. And that's my tribe. Those are the people that uplift and support. I was working at a 10-bed adult inpatient unit here in Arizona. And as I would drive into work, I would open myself up to spirit, and I say, use me in any way you can, to help my patients, because we had so many patients that were nonverbal and, couldn't let their needs be met. And I could feel, sometimes before I even got to work, I could feel which patients needed a little extra this or that, maybe needed turned a little more frequently, or needed a little more pain medication. Because just because you can't speak doesn't mean you're not in pain. I learned that recently with my stroke that I had a few months ago. So I get to work. We had 10 patients, 10 private rooms. And I went into this lady's room, and there was just something about her. I just felt a connection to her. She was probably in her 70s or 80s or something. I don't even remember her name. I remember looking her up and trying to remember if I had met her somewhere. I don't recall her at all. She was non-responsive. She had some labored breathing, and we would get two of us staff members, and we would reposition our patients and clean them up and change them and give them medicine, whatever they needed. And we'd move to the next. So we'd do like one after the other, get everybody cleaned up, do some charting, and then, do the whole circle again. And I had just taken care of this woman, and I just felt so good about her. There was just something, it's like, like she was a pal, but I don't know what, I don't recall ever meeting her. So after taking care of her, somebody down the hall needed something extra. And so I was heading down the hallway to this other patient. And when you go down the hallway, you look at everybody's room just to make, see if there's anything going on that you need to intervene with. And I went by this lady's room who was in a coma just 20 minutes prior. And the side rail's down, and she's sitting on the side of the bed and smiling at me, and her hair looks great. And, she looks like, she's 30, and big old smile on her face. And so I look at her and I thought, well, yeah, looking good. And then I head down the hallway, about 10 more steps, and I stop and I think, wait a minute, who is that? That's supposed to be this old lady in a coma. So I'm walking backwards down the hallway to get another look. I'm thinking, what's going on with you? And I get back to the room, and she's back in bed. She's non-responsive. The side rails are up. She's got her oxygen on. She's right where I had left her just a few minutes before. And I just got this feeling, you just showed me your soul. You're about ready to move on. You're like the butterfly popping out of the cocoon and stretching your wings and getting ready to take off. And you showed that to me. And I just stood there staring at her, laying in bed. And I just felt like so much gratitude. It was like, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you for showing me your soul before you died. And I went into the nurse's station. I told the rest of the staff, I just saw this lady look a third of her age sitting on the side of the bed. And now she's back in bed, and everybody goes running to go look at her. It's like, she's still in bed. So anyway, I worked through the rest of my shift. She still was alive. She was still non-responsive. And the oncoming shift came in, and I told them what I saw, and they said, oh, that's so cool, because they're seeing stuff too. I mean, it's the house of death. It's hospice. And so anyway, I get home, and I go in my front door, and down my hallway is the patient. She's standing there, and she's in it's a different, not a hospital robe, like a nice robe. She looked like she was about, 26, 27, late 20s. Her hair, like she just got out of a salon. She was young, the biggest smile you ever saw, and just looking great. And I'm staring at her, and she's staring at me, and I start crying. I said, thank you so much. Go have a wonderful new life. Thank you for sharing this with me. And then she just slowly faded away. I just kept saying, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I get on the phone. I mean, after I, was kind of in shock there for a bit, and just feeling like I won the lottery. And I called work. I said, you need to go check, on the lady in room 2. I think she just passed. And they said, no, we just left there. She's, she's not doing well, but she's still with us. And I said, I just saw her in my living room or in my hallway. I said, go check on her. I think she just passed. So they put the phone down, and they go in the room, and then they come back. I hear the pick. You're right. She just died. And it's like, oh my gosh. I got to see her. She showed me her soul. I don't want to say I got to see. She shared with me intentionally, showed me her spirit before and after her physical death. I think of that every single day. Every single day of my life, I think about her, and I can see her right now. I just, what a wonderful thing this woman did. And you know what? She probably has friends and family or someone, that, would know her and totally, enjoy getting to see this. Why she shared this with me, I have absolutely no idea. But I am so grateful. Maybe it's because so I can share it with so many people. Every place I've ever worked, I've told this story. I told it to the nurses, to the patients, to the staff members. That was just one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced.
I thought we might close this wonderful discussion we've been having with something completely different, and that would be your Home Depot experience.
Oh, it's so bizarre. And I've never been back to that Home Depot, but it's the closest one to my house. What the heck was that? It was weird. I bought this house that I'm in now, like just a little over 20 years ago. And I needed water stuff, pipe stuff, faucets and little things like that. So I can do some things, very simple things, but I just needed tiny little things for the hose and something like that. So I went to Home Depot and I was, looking for the part that I needed and just kind of minding my own business. And it was broad daylight and, I'm there. And this woman comes up to me and she's got her hair back and she had like a big nose. She looked a little bit like Margaret Hamilton. The Wicked Witch of the West, kind of like that, a little bit fatter. She had a black sweater on and like a flower printed dress on, and comes up to me. And I see her out of the corner of my eye, someone coming up to me and stands right there. And I'm looking at her and she says, "I want you to smile," and just yelled at me. And it's like, what? I didn't say anything. It's like, she goes, "I want to see people smile." And I freaking out just a bit. I didn't want to set her off anymore. And I just kind of, looked at her and gave a little smile. She got and turned around and stomped off. And it was about 20 feet to the end of the aisle. And she went down the aisle and then turned to the left and she was gone. And I thought, well, she's got some issues. I hope my little smile helped. And, I just kind of put it out of my mind and got the stuff that I needed and left. And, when, a month later or so or something like that, I had to go back and get some more, stuff for plumbing. And back in the same area and trying to find the right thing. And I see something coming up to me out of the corner of my eye. And it's her. She's just kind of wadding up, just, angrily walking towards me and says the exact same thing. "I want you to smile." And I'm looking at her and she goes, "I need to see people smile." And just made a horrible face and got so close to me. And she was wearing the exact same outfit. And it was like, what the heck is going on with this lady? But I just kind of, gave a little grin and a shrug and just gave her a smile. And she got mad and turned around and stomped away, went down to the end of the aisle and turned to the left and went down to wherever. I just thought, well, she's got some issues. She must be a frequent flyer here. And it was months and months later, I had to go back again. You never go to Home Depot once. You always got to go back. Needed more stuff. I totally forgot about this woman. And I'm back in the same area, looking for something similar. And pretty soon, out of the corner of my eye, here she comes again. And I was not in the best mood that day or something. It was like, not again. Wearing the same thing, the little black sweater and the little dotted dress and her hair pulled the same way. And she comes up to me And the same thing, I want to see you smile. I need to see people smile. And this time, this is the first time I spoke to her. And I just turned to her and looked. I said, if you want to smile, you're going to have to ask me a little nicer. And she looked at me like I just grew horns, like absolute terror, absolute fear. Her eyes got wide, her mouth just wide open, looked at me in absolute horror. And I'm thinking, what? Is she going to blow up? What's going on? And this is so bizarre. Her arms went up in the air, like shoulder length, straight out in front of her, as did her legs. Her legs flew up in the air. So probably, 3 feet. Her rear end's floating in the air about 3 feet. Her legs are pointed towards me, like almost like she's sitting on the ground or something, how your legs would be out. And she zipped backwards like she had a giant rubber band wrapped around her waist and somebody had pulled her as tight as it would go and let go. And she zoomed in about a second and a half or so, about 20 feet down the aisle and around the corner and disappeared. Absolute horror. And I'm just standing there thinking, what the heck was that? And I looked to see if anybody else was in the aisle and saw that. There was somebody way at the other end, but they weren't looking that way. So I was kind of afraid to go the 20 feet to the end of the aisle where she was, because maybe there's some energy or something going on there. It's making people disappear. But I did kind of go around and look down the aisle. I was going to ask people if they just saw some woman flying through the air, but I thought, I'm going to get escorted out. But I noticed everybody just walking by, just like nothing had happened. I mean, if they had seen that, people would be looking and talking or something, but no one did. And I just kind of stood there and looked around, and I almost asked at the checkout, do you guys have a ghost here or something? But I thought I better not. A friend of mine later did call them and ask them, and I don't know if she was new or not, but she goes, well, I don't know anything about a ghost. I have no explanation for that. I have no idea what that was, but that's 3 times. And that was probably like over 6 months that I was there those 3 times. And it was in the same area. She said the exact same thing. She was wearing the same clothing. But the one time that I talked to her, that's when she had a reaction. And I remember my grandmother telling me when I was just a little boy, she says, if you ever want to talk to a spirit, you never use your voice, that the sound of the human voice disrupts a ghost or a spirit's ability to manifest on the physical. And she says, don't even think in words or in sentence. Don't even ask them that way, but send them feelings. Send the feeling. You have a question. Send it, do you feel okay? Send it as an emotion, not as words, and never use your voice. So I wonder if the sound of the human voice just flipped her out. Oh. And I've never gone back.
Maybe she didn't realize that you had actually seen her until you spoke to her.
That could be. That's a good point. I never thought of that.
Oh.
I have no idea.
David, since you mentioned it, you've had 2 strokes this year.
Yes.
How long ago was it?
That was December. And I had one at home and then another one the next day.
And you were half paralyzed, a speech impediment?
I was completely paralyzed.
And look at you now. You told me that one of the things you did was to befriend your blood clot.
Yes, yes.
And actually give him him or her a name. Tell us about how that worked and how you compromised the blood clot that way.
When I had the stroke, luckily I had my cell phone in my hand, and they have those things for the medical alert system or something. I'm really thinking everybody should probably have one of those, because if I didn't have my phone in my hand and as I was going down and dialed 911, I would have laid here probably for weeks and people wouldn't have known. I'm by myself. So I fell into the wall and then the floor, knocked out my teeth. Um, uh, Paramedics came and took me to the hospital. I was in ICU, and it was interesting. I was in ICU where I used to be an ICU nurse for a while. I was on the floor, and I actually knew several of the doctors that took care of me. I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything but just lay there. And I didn't know what happened to me. They treated me just like a lump of, like a doorstop. And I could hear the nurses come in at times, and sometimes the nurse and the doctor would talk a little bit, but nobody spoke to me. And see, when I was a hospice nurse, I always spoke to my patients, whether they could speak or not. I would go in and introduce myself. And the thing I always told my patients is, my name's David Parker. I'm going to be your nurse tonight, and I'm the best nurse in the state of Arizona. You're getting the best care in the state of Arizona tonight with me, and I am going to take such good care of you. And all my patients, I would tell them what's going on. If they're non-responsive, this is what's going on. You've had, your cancer's progressed, but we're going to be giving you pain medicine, and we're going to take care of you. And I'm going to be checking in on you, and you're not alone. I would always do that to my patients, and no one did that to me. Right. And let me tell you, when I got better, what a letter I wrote to that hospital. So I'm laying there. I'm in such pain. I can't turn myself. I can't control my bladder. I can't do anything. And I would love to have told them, give me something for pain. What happened? I thought maybe it was a drive-by shooting and I got shot. That's what, it felt so bad. Yeah. And I didn't know what was going on. And finally, then the next day, it got even worse. And it ended up, I had a stroke, a clot. And the next day I threw another clot. So I had two clots in my brain. Wow. No one telling me anything. No one giving me any care. The only person that was actually kind of good to me was the housekeeper that came in to mop the floor. And she would tuck me in and, make sure I was turned. And it was this little Hispanic lady. She's the only one that really gave me care from the nurses and the physicians. So I couldn't do anything but just lay there in horrible pain. But I have practiced meditation for years. And I took, years ago, it was called Silva Mind Control. It's now called the Silva Method. And I have taken it several times because it's just a simple system of meditation. You learn the techniques, they work, and you don't have to guess, you don't have to figure it out, but you can reduce your brain waves easily down to the alpha level or even lower in a matter of seconds practicing these techniques. And I had been practicing the Silva method for quite a while. So I was able, I figured I'd just land here and I might as well do something. So I ended up meditating about 12 hours a day. What else are you going to do? So they have a part of the meditation is you shrink your attention down to the cellular level. And they would have a meditation where you can visualize, what the inside of a skin cell would look like, and practice. And I practice prior just to get more control over my thought process, to be able to focus about one thought at a time. And I would practice this. Well, who knew that practicing that meditation technique would come in so handy? So I'm paralyzed. I'm in horrible pain. And I did my meditation. I reduced my attention down to the cellular level, and I went inside my own head. And I totally expected to see a bullet in there. I mean, that's just, for whatever reason, that's the way I pictured it. And I went inside my head and went inside my brain, visualizing in my meditative techniques. And I saw this huge clot. And then later the other clot came too. It caused another clot. And it was just blocking all the neurons. And this is why I couldn't talk. I couldn't move my mouth. I couldn't form a word. I could think, but I couldn't I couldn't manifest my thoughts. And so I'm sitting there looking at this clot, and I just imagine him. I called him Hot Clot. I said, "You're a pretty hot clot there, Mr. Clot." And I gave him two eyes, a big kind of a Groucho nose, and a big mouth. And I gave him hands with gloves on them and little feet, little cartoon feet. I made him into like a cartoon character so he would speak back to me. So, that's why I called him Hot Clot. So then, every time I talk, "Hey, Hot Clot." So I would have him talk back to me, and it just kind of naturally happened. "What's going on, Hot Clot?" Nothing, Dave, just kind of hanging out here." "Where am I?" I says, "You're in my brain, Hot Clot, and you're kind of interfering in my thought process. I can think these thoughts, but I can't get my mouth to form the words." He said, "Wow, that's weird, Dave. What are you going to do about that?" And I would say, "Hot Clot, it's you. Would you be a buddy and maybe move your clot experience somewhere else where it doesn't interfere in my life or in anybody else's life? Can you be a clot somewhere else?" And then the clot would say, "Hey, Dave, sure, show me what to do and let's do that." So I made it into like this fun little animation that I wasn't a victim, that I just I was in a circumstance, and the person that's causing the circumstance, I became friends with. So the clot wasn't the enemy. I turned him into my pal. I said, "You know what? How about we dislodge some of these fibrogen cells that form a blood clot? How about you and I take them apart and kind of brush them off and put them back in the bloodstream, and let's slowly just kind of change you from a huge clot down to a tiny little clot." And the Hot Clot would say, "Well, yeah, Dave, let's do that." It was like a fun game. And I would spend 12 hours a day, Hot Clot and I, brushing off these little fibrogen, the cells, and, that are there. Your body forms a clot to keep you from bleeding to death. I mean, it's there for a reason. But when they happen in your brain, then it's a problem. So slowly and slowly and slowly, we kept pulling clot cells out and brushing them off and sending them in my bloodstream, and watching the clot get smaller and smaller and smaller. And I was starting to feel a little bit better, but I still couldn't move my mouth. So my brain, I gave it a face. The part of my brain that I was thinking, I called it my thinking brain. And I gave it a face and hands and a mouth. And I started talking to my brain, and I gave it a telephone, and I put the telephone wire around Hot Clot and gave it to my mouth, another phone to my mouth. So my mouth, it already has a mouth, but I gave it, eyes and a nose and hands. And I had my brain call on the phone to my mouth. And then I imagined my mouth picking up the phone and saying, "Hey, brain, what's going on?" And I would have my brain tell my mouth, "I want you to say hello. I want you to say hello. Let's start moving those lips and getting them moving to say hello." And pretty soon my mouth, I wasn't speaking, but I was able to move my lips and make out, hello, without saying it. Just my mouth started moving, where before my tongue was just hanging out. And then I had my brain, calling my fingers and calling the rest of my body. I gave little telephones to every part of my body, and in my thinking brain calling them, "It's time to start moving your fingers. It's time to start being able to move your shoulders." And all the while, Hot Clot and I are dislodging the clots. I'm doing this 12 hours a day. And I made a remarkable recovery. And I've taken care of stroke patients for many years. Some people do recover well over time. Some people recover, some people don't recover at all. Some people recover just a tiny little bit. But I was able to be released in 9 days. I still had, I had to have physical therapy. I had to have someone help me with a shower. I had to have speech therapy. And pretty soon I was fired by my speech therapist. And I have been talking just fine. I have a little issue with balance now, but that's it. I really have no other deficits. The last scan I had, they said there was a little bit of scar tissue in there, but there's nothing left. I just put the meditation, into use, and I did it at least 12 hours a day. And wow. I did that several weeks.
But what a rapid recovery as a result.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And a complete recovery. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
David, you've lived a fascinating and truly blessed life.
Yes.
And you've provided incredible service to others. I'm blessed to know you and to have you on the show. Tell listeners how they can find your website.
Yeah, I have a channel on YouTube. It's Uncle Dave's Kitchen. I was going to start a cooking show, but then I kind of realized that maybe sharing some of my spirit stories I've had throughout my life might be a little more important than biscuits and gravy, though eventually I will do a cooking show. And that's Uncle Dave's Kitchen on YouTube.
Before we started recording this, you said perhaps you'd do a cooking show and then break for a story and then go back to some more cooking. And I think that would be a lovely way to present these.
Yeah, well, through my childhood, that's what we all just kind of congregated in the kitchen and just shared stories and talked. And Mom would be cooking, and we would, say what went on in school. And I think that would be very nice.
My thanks to David Parker, RN, for sharing the details of his amazingly spirit-filled life. If you enjoyed this show, I strongly recommend you check out his website, or his YouTube channel, I should say, for more of the stories you heard about today. And if you'd like to hear the show again or any of our more than 500 archived, ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.